House. On Saturday, we will mark 20 years since the September 11th terrorist attacks, a day that changed America. Our Brent Hardin was the 10 p.m. news anchor here at Fox 61 on that fateful day in 2001, and he'll be in New York City to mark the anniversary. But before he left, I sat down with him to reflect on that day and where he was the moment the plane hit the first tower.
We had a 2-month-old at the time, and I was actually sitting in a chair in the family room feeding my daughter a bottle. And I flipped on the TV, and the first image I saw was the first tower with that gaping hole and the smoke streaming out. And so I called into my wife to come in and watch it with me, and of course we all know we watched that for 15 to 20 minutes before the second plane hit the second tower. And suddenly, I think, like everybody else watching, when the second plane hit, I realized what we were dealing with. And so I handed off the baby and got in the shower and came on into work.
What was the atmosphere here in the newsroom?
Yeah, I remember it being very subdued, which makes a lot of sense. I mean, the world had just blown up, and even in a television newsroom, we had never experienced anything like this. Nobody had. People were quiet, going about their business. But you know how this works. What we had to do immediately is decide what stories could be done out of our newsroom, what stories we needed to do out of our newsroom, and then get people dispatched out to go work on those. We dispatched one reporter to New York just to get in and get whatever he could. So
many people from Connecticut commute into New York City for work every day. Right. Were there people here in the newsroom with connections to Manhattan? Yeah,
as a matter of fact, I don't even know how many there might have been. There were a number, but in the newsroom, I remember our weekend anchor, Carolee Salerno, was anchoring with me that day because my co-anchor at the time, Susan Christensen, people will remember, she was actually in Europe on that day. So Carolee was working with me. Carolee's husband was with the DEA, and he had called her that morning after the first plane hit to say that he was going to be working in downtown Manhattan. And then she didn't hear from him the rest of the day. And so he went in there and reported, and then buildings began to fall. And of course, we all know what kind of chaos developed that day. I did talk to Carolee about that just recently to refresh my memory and to see what she remembered. And I asked her how she got through it, how she could get through the day and do her work, worried about her husband, being in the middle of all that. And what she said was kind of mercifully, it just took a long time for it to really dawn on her how bad things were there in New York. Otherwise, I think she said, otherwise she would not have been able to focus on her work at all.
When you think back on that day, what stands out in your mind? What affected you most?
I don't know about that day. That day, I think I was like everybody else. And even though I was in a newsroom and we had to report on it, I think I was like everyone else. I was going through the motions. We were all doing the best we could, but we were all just floored. But I'll tell you, by the second day and by the third day, I'll tell you what got to me. The first day we had all the huge numbers, the nearly 3,000 people who had died. And that's a horrible thing to have to deal with. But then the next day, see, that was the forest, if you will. The next day were the trees. It was the individual people with the hopes and dreams and goals and loved ones left behind. And that was a lot harder for me to report on the individual people and hear their stories and to watch their loved ones really suffering. That was hard.
And again, Brent will be there live in New York City. Each year, we find ourselves reflecting about where we were, what we were doing, and who we were with 20 years ago on September 11th when all of that happened. Like Brent, several Fox 61 employees are sharing their stories. You can read them right now on our website, FOX61.com. And you can always expect more continuing coverage from Fox 61 as the country pauses to reflect and remember September 11th, 2001. Brent will be live from New York City tomorrow and Saturday, showing how our nation is remembering the day. You can also get more on the Fox 61 News app and FOX61.com.